Hello everyone. This workshop is part of a series of mindscape activities which connects people to nature through art. They're designed for people with dementia along with their family and or carers, but they're also suitable for other groups such as families with children. Mindscape is a Wye Valley area of outstanding natural beauty and Artspace Cinderford project. It's part of the Foresters Forest, the National Lottery Heritage Fund and the Landscape Partnership Programme. And each of these YouTube videos is accompanied with a step-by-step activity guide that you can download from the Artspace Cinderford website. Hello and welcome to the Mindscape Activities Workshops. For this session, I'm going to attempt to make a bit of pottery. In particular, something that I call an upside down pot. For this technique, we're going to exploit the clay's malleable ability to form folds, a bit like placing a cloth over an object and seeing all the folds and ripples. Plus, we're also going to impress into the clay, and using natural objects you can gently make interesting patterns and textures just by gently pressing it into the clay. So it's always a good idea just to have a little experiment beforehand to see what objects actually work best when impressed into the clay. For this particular demonstration, I'm going to use some of these fern leaves. I've also got a can, anything like a soup can or a baked bean can, any small sort of jar structure that we can use as a sort of plinth, a sort of hump mould to place our floppy clay over. And I don't have a rolling pin, but you'll need one. I'm being a bit creative here. I'm going to use this old sealant tube, but just something so I can roll out the ball of clay to the size of something like a pancake. The clay I'm going to use is air dry clay. This is probably the most accessible clay for the people that would be doing this activity. It reacts similarly to traditional clay, except it doesn't need to be fired and it's easily available on the internet. However, if you wanted to use traditional clay and you could find possibly a local potter or a local ceramicist that had a kiln that would fire them for you for a small fee, perhaps that would be an option. I'm also going to use this plastic bag just as a barrier at some point in the demonstration. As I do this demonstration, I'm going to be working on a wooden board. I just need a surface that the clay won't stick to. So if you have something similar, or maybe some cardboard or some paper that you could put down, that might benefit you whilst you're working. Take your ball of clay and just pat it for a while just to compress it into a neat little ball. I'm using something the size roughly of an orange here, and we're going to roll it out to create a sort of pancake shape, a round shape. It always is easier to stand up whilst you're doing this, but perhaps some of the learners that are doing this activity might struggle. So if you think they're capable of standing up, they might find it a little bit easier. Now to get the folds in our clay, it's going to need to be fairly thin. I would say about the thickness of a rich tea biscuit. As you can see, I'm sort of rolling the clay out to sort of form a rough circular shape, but it doesn't need to be perfect. I'm probably going for something with a diameter of about 8 to 9 inches. So there we go, that looks fairly round. It'll be fine. And I'm just going to thin those edges out as well slightly. Okay. Now, the fun bit is pressing your objects into the clay. And I'm going to go for a fairly random arrangement here, but if you take your objects or whatever it is you're going to use to make your impressions, you can either stamp them in gently, or in this case I'm going to need to roll them in. So let me just put them in like that. And this eventually will be the outside of our pot. Now, I might need to do these one at a time, but using your rolling pin, just gently go over the surface, and you can see, as I'll show you in a second when I pick this up, the clay has formed this lovely impression of the leaf. When these are dry, you'll be able to stain them with a little bit of paint, a little bit diluted paint, which will collect in all the little nooks and crannies and produce a nice little organic pattern. See if I can just get these without damaging the other ones. So I guess this bit could be a bit tricky. I think I'm being adventurous trying to do all three at one go there. May have been best to do them one at a time, but for the sake of the demonstration I just wanted to speed things up. Okay, so be careful when you pick them out. We're trying not to damage the clay too much. Okay, right. I'll show you a better shot of this when it's finished, but the clay has quite beautifully picked up all the details of the leaf. So your next stage is to take this pancake of clay and we're going to drop it on top of this can. Now, this is where I'm going to use this scrunched up ball of paper, and I'm just going to place it on top of the can and cover it with this plastic bag, and that just stops A, the clay from sticking to anything when I take it off, and B, stops it from getting damaged on that hard edge of the can. So if you can carefully take your clay, I'm going to place it on top of the can. Now, at this stage it sort of sags a little bit, but it needs a little bit of help. So this is where you gently start to contrive those folds and ripples. And you can make as many as you want really, and you should be able to sort of sense how much the clay will allow you to do it. I wouldn't overdo it, and that's why I've always referred to them as upside down pots, because you make them whilst they're upside down. So the last thing I want to do is just flatten what will be the base, so that when it's dry and it sits on a tabletop or a shelf, it's got a flatter surface and won't rock so much. So you just need something with a hard, flat edge, and the quickest, easiest thing I had close at hand was the underside of this plate. So I'm just going to tap that slightly and hopefully just flatten off the base of the clay. I can see it flattening off quite nicely there. Okay, I think that should do it. So now it's just a waiting game. These things usually take between 24 hours and 48 hours to completely dry. That's when I'll show you the next stage where we can apply diluted paint. Okay, so I've waited 48 hours for my pot to dry, This stage is optional really, but I'm not sure if the camera can pick up on the subtle impressions of the fern leaves. I'm going to try washing a bit of diluted acrylic paint into those impressions to try and exaggerate them and achieve something like this. The impressions on this particular pot are quite subtle, so the effect will be quite subtle. So a little saucer of water mixed with a little bit of acrylic. I've also got myself a washed out wet wipe. It's quite a nice rag to sort of wipe away the surface from, and a little pot of water in case I need it. So be gentle at this stage. The air dry clay is fairly robust, but you wouldn't particularly want to drop it. So wipe it over, or brush it over I should say. You probably need a few aprons at this stage. There we go. I think the sort of chocolate brown colour warms it up quite nicely, and it is just sort of catching those subtle impressions of the leaves. For this particular example, I may not even wipe anything off. I'm going to do the same on the inside, and yeah, that does produce a really nice warm colour. So have a think whether your particular upside down pot could benefit from a little stain, a little wash of colour. Again, let it dry, and there you have it. Impressed clay upside down pot. Hope you enjoy it.